Welcome to the Better with Age podcast. Today, I have a special guest, and this starts the first part of our series about self-defense. So my guest today is Pamela Boveda. She's an athlete and an engineer from Paraguay. She's distinguished as the first female aeronautical engineer and the first woman to earn a black belt in Jiu Jitsu in her country. Her achievements include podium in prestigious IBJJF tournaments and other federations, as well as mixed martial arts competitions in many countries around the world. For several years, she volunteered for different agencies with seminars, talks, and teaching in aeronautical and space subjects. She spent several years referring, competing, and teaching rules and self-defense seminars for women in different countries, such as the United States, Germany, Argentina, Paraguay, and others. She continues to share her passions, but her main purpose is to pursue her PhD at the University of Minnesota. Welcome to the Better with Age podcast, Pam. Thanks for so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
You are officially the first Jiu Jitsu practitioner and rocket scientist to be on the podcast. So kudos to you. That's awesome. If you would, maybe just share a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, where you grew up, and how you got into Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I'm Pamela. I am originally from Paraguay. My mother is Brazilian, so actually my first language was Portuguese and not Spanish. And I'm from a city where within like 30 minutes you can be in three different countries, which is Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil. So it's a very cool place, and I grew up there. And when I got to the age of 18, I finished school. I had to go for my studies, but at that time I could not find the career I wanted to pursue in Paraguay, so I moved to Argentina. So I did my undergrad there. And from there, I got some jobs, went back to Paraguay, forward to Argentina, and I spent some years in Florida also training Jiu Jitsu. But it all started there in that city that I mentioned. It's called triple border because you have those borders in between the countries. So yeah, just one day I was in a like normal gym, and back there in the gym they had like these very old mats, and they were training. They were all guys, and I don't know. It looked very interesting. So I went there and I asked if like women could also train because there was no women at that training, and they said for sure, and they welcomed me, and I was very lucky to find these people who introduced me to jiu-jitsu. And well, after that, I found out that there were other girls, but like they're 300 kilometers away from my city.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandmother lives there. So every time I would travel to see my grandmother, I would go and train with this only other girl, which was fun. She's a close friend right like now. So, yep.
That's awesome. So maybe we should just describe for those that are unfamiliar what Jiu-Jitsu is, and in particular, how it can be very helpful for self-defense purposes.
Mm-hmm. So you know how people have these books, blah 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 for dummies. So some people they describe jiu-jitsu as when you watch UFC, which most of people watch UFC, and everything you see on the ground when they're not hitting each other, basically that's jiu-jitsu. So it's a martial art and a sportive, competitive sport that is based on the principles of self-defense, where we cannot hit or kick each other, but we can use a lot of control, we can use a lot of chokes, we can use attacks to any joint of the body. So basically, jiu-jitsu is what you see at UFC when they're not hitting each other.
I think for me, so full disclosure, I do jiu-jitsu. I've got my kids in jiu-jitsu. One of the things that was so appealing and is so appealing about it is this idea that your first line of defense most of the time is going to be run away. If you can run away, if you can get yourself out of the situation, that's going to be plan A all the time if you can manage that. But if somebody closes a distance to a point where they can strike you or they're going to grab you, that's really where jiu-jitsu starts. And I think in particular for me, I have a young daughter, and our family is not particularly large framed or big. And as a father, I want her to be as prepared as possible to defend herself in various situations. And what I think about jujitsu is that typically a weaker opponent or one with less strength, just generally, can use leverage, particularly the other person's body weight, to be able to be very effective and to either stop a fight before it gets to a place of blows, or, just particularly with respect to the benefits for women. I've just for a long time been very dubious of the idea that somebody would be able to punch or kick their way through, a giant enraged man. Whereas if you use certain chokes, for example, it doesn't matter really the size difference, and you can stop the fight, and actually it's much more humane than knocking them out with a punch or a kick. Is that one of the things that appeals to you about the use for self-defense purposes, or Pam, or what resonates most to you for jujitsu as a defense?
So what you said, everything you said is like super accurate. It's exactly like that. If you don't need to engage in a fight, of course, please do not do that. And whenever you're teaching like a normal class or a self-defense class, like a normal jiu-jitsu class or a self-defense class, I think that's something that coaches usually need to, it's very important that they repeat this. And because if you want to try a move or something, that's what you have your practice for. And there is where you should try everything and be in the basically in the learning experience and the trying experience. And you don't really want to use that. Like I always say, this is one of the things I teach that I hope you never use when I teach a
Mhm.
self-defense seminar, right? For example, if you're teaching Spanish or whatever, you want people to use what you're teaching them. But this is something I really hope they never had to use, right? And it's exactly like that. The self-defense itself, you can have an approach to self-defense based on Krav Maga. You can have an approach to self-defense based on Muay Thai, based on many other arts, right? And also based on Jiu-Jitsu. But the difference itself between the others, well, as you said, like leverage and physics, right? If you're calculating the impact of something, usually you have to care about the mass, the velocity, and all these other parameters. But in jiu-jitsu, like as you're not hitting, it's not like it's so important like how strong you are, but it's all about the technique. So you can usually like go to a training and see smaller people like winning the training, right? Against like much bigger opponents, and people get very like how do you say, like they get very like, whoa, okay, wow, what's going on, like she's
Mhm.
so small or he's so small and this other person is so big, and how is this happening? So jiu-jitsu is a lot about of techniques, right? Like knowing exactly, like, and also using the moves or of your opponent in your favor.
Mhm.
Okay, if the person is just pushing forward so much, maybe you just have to skip and let the person fall, and then you go back to their back or stuff like that. A lot of strategy, a lot of what I really love about jiu-jitsu is that it's not only something that will make your like physical, your body itself work, but it will make your mind work so much.
Mm.
And I think that's actually what like made me fall in love with the sport, because it's not only about just going and repeating like in a gym or whatever the same move over and over again. But of course I think it's important to like drill and practice some moves that you want to like have it more properly. But I think it's a lot about how you react and how you really think about the whole rolling experience. So yeah, for self-defense, jiu-jitsu is very different from the other self-defenses approaches, because you're not really focusing on like how hard you can get this person or whatever, and it's a lot more about strategy.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about chokes for a little for a moment. So I referenced them earlier, but obviously chokeholds and those sorts of things, a very charged topic, particularly here in Minneapolis in light of what happened to George Floyd in 2020. And so one of the repercussions of that is law enforcement, at least locally, was pretty much barred or is pretty much barred from using chokeholds as a subduing technique or as even a self-defense technique. So can you talk a little bit about the value of a chokehold for self-defense, for example, and maybe how chokeholds could be applied appropriately versus inappropriately, and how they really are an important aspect to one's self-defense?
So I don't, maybe I don't know exactly how everything happened here in Minneapolis with that issue itself, but what I can say, like from my experience, is that whenever you are getting choked, right, you're still breathing. So sometimes you think you're okay, but actually the blood is not going to your brain anymore. So at some point you feel that you're holding it, that you're okay with it, and at some point you're just sleeping, right? But of course that will not go further, that will not, like, something worse will not happen if you let go at that time. If the person, like, goes to sleep, we say, I don't know the exact word in English, but if the person, like, sleeps, basically you let go the person, of course, right? And in a competition, paramedics will come, they will put the legs up so the blood can start going again to the brain and everything. The thing is, if you're going to use for self-defense, I think you should be, if you know the technique and everything, you should be able to apply that. And again, as we said before, we run, we get help, we don't stay there like forever, even if the person is sleeping and then there's no blood, no blood, no blood, and at some point that could be a disaster, which is basically what happened, right? So
Yeah.
this police officer did not use a choke just to control this person, the person. It's so he used it for further and further and further. So at some point, it was a tragedy. Okay, if he had used it just to, okay, he's like slept or he's like tranquil or something, and then he put the handcuff or anything, that would be another story, right? So yeah, chokes are very important for the coaches to teach in the proper way, because it's very common also that even in training, because when we start jiu-jitsu we don't know our body, and we actually don't, we think we know our body, but then we practice jiu-jitsu and we realize we don't really know our bodies. And so sometimes we think, ah, no, I'm okay with this, I can still hold it or whatever, and at some point you're just sleeping there. It had happened to me, like my first competition. I wasn't sure, like, how, it's not that I, it's not about in that case. A lot of other cases are an ego thing, okay? But in my case, it wasn't an ego thing. It was just my first competition, and I didn't really know how hard I could, like, avoid the choke or work my way out of it. And at some point, I was sleeping, and then I just woke up with the doctors, paramedics, whatever, out of the mat, right? So it's very important that, like, coaches, when someone is new, explain all these things, that you will feel everything's going on okay, but actually your blood's not going to your brain, and that you might kind of sleep, pass out for some seconds, okay? Which is of course something I, everyone says, like, oh, everyone should experience that, but I think that if you can avoid that and never experience that, that's the best thing, because it's not good for you not to have blood, all right, and going through your brain. So yeah, I think chokes are very important, that coaches know, explains how to, whenever you're feeling, before you're feeling a little dizzy or anything, you should just stop. And if you're gonna use as a self-defense tool, whenever you feel that the person is out or, like, is not, like, putting some strain on you, you should call help, you should get out of the place, you shouldn't, like, keep going at any point.
Yeah, I think it's a great story that you shared. I mean, not great in the competition sense, but you have that experience of being choked out or put to sleep, as you say. Can you describe maybe with a little bit more detail how you felt when you came to in that scenario?
Well, in my experience, it was just like, I started getting, like, a lot of pressure, but I still thought I could handle it. And at some point, I just woke up with the paramedics.
Yeah.
But from the refereeing perspective, because I have refereed a lot of tournaments and a lot of different federations, and I unfortunately, when you are an adult, you have to tap the referee. Like, if I think that you're gonna get choked and go to sleep, I cannot stop, because you're an adult and you should know when to tap, right? With kids is something completely different. If I, the referee, think they're in any danger or whatever, I have to stop the match, right? But I have seen a lot of people that they really think that they are able to get out of the choke, and is not usually the case. Once the choke is like well applied, it's very, very hard to defend it. Basically, you have to think about the defense of any choke like previous steps, not really when you have the choke on you. When you have the choke on you, it's basically a matter of time.
Right.
Sometimes people think, this person is not tapping or whatever. It's just a matter of time. You have to just hold her, because you're just avoiding the blood flow, and that's it.
Yeah. I think it's an important distinction that we talk about this idea of losing consciousness from a choke, as you've described. It's momentary, you wake up, there's really no lingering after effects. And then we contrast that to somebody, for example, that's knocked unconscious, either with a punch or a kick, or their head hits the ground or an object, whatever that happens to be. That is a scenario where that person now has a traumatic brain injury. So any knockout that somebody sees, and UFC or boxing, that is a traumatic brain injury. And working in the world of physical therapy and having worked with people who have had various degrees of traumatic brain injuries over the years, there's no such thing as a small concussion. I mean, they all have lingering effects, and especially the more severe the concussion is, the more significantly that can impact somebody both acutely but also long term as well. And so, again, I think it can be such an important tool to be able to subdue an opponent without really hurting them. I mean, that's the other thing. And, personally being a male, it's really important. If I was in a self-defense scenario, even if I'm defending myself and let's say I struck somebody, or even they tripped and they hit their head on the ground and they went out, that can be dubious ground as far as legal consequences for me. Versus if I can subdue somebody and I can either restrain them with a joint lock or a choke and put them to sleep and then get out of there, I'm really not doing them any harm, and I'm not going to set myself up for the same amount of legal consequences, because depending on the county attorney or the tone of the town as far as um, what the criminal justice system is leaning towards, defendants versus prosecutors, that can be different dicey situations. So I'm just a very strong advocate for people who value the importance of self-defense to have some complement of chokes in. And I think you spoke pretty well about why that can be so important. Let's talk about have you had any scenarios? You've talked a little bit about competition. Have you had any scenarios outside of competition, maybe using jiu-jitsu in a self-defense context, or where your jiu-jitsu got you out of trouble or a dicey situation, Pam?
Yeah, I can talk about like two different things, right? I don't like generalizing, right? But basically in South America, the probability of you getting mugged or robbed is a little bit higher than here, okay? So that's just talking about probability. So I'm not saying one place is better or one place is worse. But the thing is, I've seen a lot of like robbery or mugging or whatever in South America. And I think one thing that Jiu-Jitsu gives you is a lot of like a real-time reaction, because when you're fighting or competing, if you don't have the reaction, the time reaction, then basically you can lose, even if you have better technique or even if you're stronger or whatever. So I think I could avoid a lot of times being robbed in the street, and like in a bus and in different situations, because of that like awareness and always being aware of what's going on around me and paying attention. And I think that helped me a lot. And for sure, it has to do with jiu-jitsu because you basically feel the same that you're feeling when you're like competing and rolling. So the level of adrenaline is up because you're kind of in danger. And but then I had this other experience in it doesn't matter when exactly or where exactly, but I had this job, and this boss of ours, he would basically say hello to every woman, like putting hand on their waist. And a lot of the girls did not feel comfortable, and me including. So one day at some point, he put his hand in my waist, and I basically do like an armbar from standing, like kind of joking, but like attacking his joint. I'm like, not like this, please, like making a joke, but really making a statement.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really the last time he did it to me, because like it was kind of like a joke, but I wasn't really laughing about it. So I wouldn't say it was self-defense, but for sure it was a tool that got me out of that situation. Some years later, the guy got like kicked out of the company, and he had a lot of problems with the law and everything. But it took so long for these other women to actually do something about it. And I think I just got out of the whole situation just because of my joke, which actually was a real thing. But did not want to be rude because at the end of the day, he was my boss, right? So yeah, those are like fortunately, I never had to basically use it against a person in the street, but I know people like very close to me that had to. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it was very good that they knew jujitsu. And yeah.
Well, it's a good example, obviously not the situation being good, but how jiu-jitsu can be used as a tool. So you can put somebody in a joint lock, for example, and not hurt them, but you can make very clear without needing to use words, for example, that you have the capability to be able to defend yourself, and if need be, that you could escalate this to a higher level of engagement. And a lot of times, as you as told in your example, Pam, a person sees that or experiences that, and they know to stay clear, and then that can be a really important thing for preventing any escalation of that person's conduct with you. So I think that's good. The other thing that you brought up that I really appreciated that is really great about jujitsu, I think, to your point, when you're practicing jujitsu, there's a point where you're maybe going slow and just doing technique, but then most of the time during every class, there's going to be an opportunity to roll, as we call it, or to practice live. And I think that's one of the unique things about this martial art, unlike so many others. You, I mean, if we were to take, for example, a striking sport like Taekwondo or karate, you there's a certain point where you can't be kicked and punched in the head over and over. I mean, as we were talking about before, that can be very dangerous. But with jujitsu, you can still go very hard, and so you can get used to that feeling of adrenaline, as you said, how your breathing changes, and maybe you get tunnel vision at first, or your hands kind of cramp up. I remember a buddy from the gym. We both go to Southside BJJ in Northeast Minneapolis, and a buddy of mine, he's around my same age. He's in his early 40s, and I was watching him at his first competition against a similar sized person, and he did fine and from an outward experience, but when he got back, he was talking about how his hands just cramped up, like it was such a dump of adrenaline in that situation that his body had never been in that before. But with subsequent competitions, you get used to that, and any fighting situation or confrontation, you're often going to be faced with this massive sympathetic surge of adrenaline in your system. Blood's going to be shunted to different areas in your body. And to be used to being in that situation, I think, is one of the secret sauce as to how jujitsu can be so helpful, because you're used to steadying your breath and you're used to being calm in that situation. So I think your point is really good. Maybe speaking of breath, how was it for you when you first competed? Was it difficult for you to uh, control your breath, and how does your breath factor into when you're rolling with somebody? Is it something you think about anymore, or is it just automatic that you're able to control it now, Pam?
So for a long time, because everyone has their own approach to jiu-jitsu or their own goal or objective, right? Some people they want to do jiu-jitsu to have fun, others to have friends. Other for me, for the most time of my life was just about like competing and improving and having a better jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying like one is better than the other. I'm just saying that everyone has a different goal, right? And mindset. So for me, I always wanted to train super hard, and like I would talk to people and say that if I'm like really training like as hard as I'm going to compete, then it's just a matter of the context, right? Like here is the gym, but I'm doing the same thing, right? So I always wanted to go like very, very hard and train super hard. This is something right now I'm changing. Right now I feel that sometimes I want to improve more, I don't know, certain specific details, but at some point in my life it was just all about going super hard, right? Which I think is very important also for the coaches to make sure what is the student goal,
Mm.
because it's not really nice that you put me that want to train super hard with someone just want to chill or learn or do some exercise. Maybe this person will not have a good experience, and maybe that will be the reason for them not to come anymore, right? But the thing about breathing is that it will always be very different in competition. We think that it's the same, but then, as you said, right, there's so much adrenaline, and a lot of your outcome is about how your mind is that day.
Mm.
Like, if your mind is not okay, you can be super technically prepared and super everything, but then you can be like, how do you say, you can drown on your own breathing, like, and then you're going to be thinking about how to actually breathe properly, and at that point you're not really caring about your technique, not caring, but you're not being able to pay the whole attention to what you're doing technically, and that's maybe when it can go wrong, right, for you, or well, not go wrong, but basically you can lose your match, right? But I did realize something, like I used to think that it was kind of like, I know like physically you have the altitude and everything, but I thought that it wouldn't care, it wouldn't matter that much. And then I had the experience of actually competing in Colombia, which is high altitude.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, I had never experienced something like that. It was after the first match, I just thought I would basically die. I just felt so out of air. And I think like if you, anyone that is like competing full time or like taking jiu-jitsu into basically a serious competition thing, it's very good to experience that. So you can like really see how breathing is important, and like knowing how to control. Fortunately, I was able to like get over that drowning in the after the first match, and then the rest of them were like much better. But for sure, I could not like go super fast in the beginning. I had to basically balance the whole match, or else it would happen again, and that would be it. So yeah, it's very important to like see what your goal is, and in order to like when you know your goal, you can know, you know, if you need to push more yourself, like put more pressure, basically train hard, or if you just would like to learn and have fun, then you don't really need to go through all this.
Yeah. So, do you have any strategies that you employ? Let's say you're in the middle of a roll and it's intense and maybe it's equal competition, or maybe you're rolling against somebody of higher skill and you're working really hard. How do you use your breath? So intentionally, how might you choose to use your breath to stay in control of your body or to avoid panic? Do you have any particular strategies or techniques or um, verbiage that you use as self-talk to try and use your breath as an anchor to where you want to be?
So at some point in my life, I had some basically some issues, some things that happened that were not very good. And I started having like a lot of panic attacks and like claustrophobic effects or things like that. And in Jiu-Jitsu, of course, you know the position when someone passes your guard and stays very, very heavy on you on side control, or if after that they mount you and they put a lot of pressure, you can get that feeling of like
Hmm.
claustrophobia or a lot of anxiety, or And as every maybe professional will tell you, I'm not the one to talk about it, but I have done those exercises. Breathing is always going to take you out of this crazy spot that your mind puts you in, because basically nothing is happening. It's just weight over you. It can happen. Like it's very normal. A lot of people, there was this very famous competitor that people used to like really say a lot of bad things about him. He's like, whenever he's not winning, he's just giving up. But it's not that he was giving up. He was having panic attacks
Hmm.
when getting to certain positions, you know.
Hmm.
But people that don't go through that, they don't really understand what they're talking about. They just say, he's just a quitter or whatever, you know. But you can have a lot of like um these like super claustrophobic feelings if you don't know how to breathe properly. And also that's something that you can gain from jiu-jitsu, right? I'm not saying to put yourself there if you're not having, but slowly and training with the right people, understanding that it's all about breathing and technique and being like aware of what's happening, then you're going to see that everything will work out. Like you're going to be able to get out of the position, or maybe if you are in the position, you're not going to go crazy about being there. You're just going to be able to handle whatever happens. You win, you lose, whatever. But breathing is super important to basically putting your mind in the right place. And competing, like they will not like go halfway, right? They're going to go super, super hard. And maybe that can trigger those. Like for a while, I was very scared that I would not be able to compete again because that was happening very, very often. But I just kept working with like professionals and kept working on, because I enjoy competing. And the thing I enjoy about competing is all the progress I make before the competition.
Hmm.
So like I told my friend some months ago, like just sign up for the competition, do everything you need to do for the competition to get there. And if one day before the competition you don't want to do it, don't do it, you know. But all the improvement you had, no one's taking that away from you because
Right.
you did, you know. So basically, it had happened to me that you know what, I don't think I should compete. Like my mind is not in the right place, but I did all the technical and physical effort, and my jiu-jitsu, like of course it improved by doing that, you know. So that's the thing I like about competition. And yeah, I think a lot of like breathing is so important. And some gyms, actually I have been in other gyms that, for example, on Fridays they would do like stretching and breathing and yoga. So I think we can benefit a lot from people that actually work with that, you know, like people from yoga, from stretching, from any other thing that, or even like psychiatrists or psychologists, they
Mhm.
actually know a lot, right, about breathing. And I think it's very important, and it's for sure something that helped me go back to competition and enjoy competition again after that time in my life.
Sure. And I think as you're talking about your example, it really boils down to this idea of learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I think as a metaphor for life in general, there's a lot of people who really try and go in the opposite direction of discomfort, whether that's by making difficult decisions with what they eat or exercise or staying disciplined with certain things. That, there's just a wonderful book out there called Comfort Crisis, Michael Easter. I recommend it to so many patients that I work with, but really, again, many people talk about jujitsu as this microcosm of life, this idea that if you can learn to control one's breath in uncomfortable situations, your mindset in difficult situations, that can really have carryover into other areas of your life. So I think your stories are well said. For anybody that's maybe curious about trying jujitsu, do you have any suggestions with regards to what they should look for in a gym? Maybe good cultures or bad cultures of different gyms? Anything that you've experienced or advice that you would have for people?
I think that for sure, in the first place, you need to make sure like what is your main goal with the sport, right? Because there are some places that they are more focused on competition. Others they have everything, so you should maybe choose your schedule based on that. Okay, I want to be a competitor, whatever. Then I go to the pro training. To okay, so your goal is number one. if you just want to try, see how it goes, and then later decide, then of course you can do that also. But knowing like your goal is very important to see like where you're gonna go. And nowadays, like all information, right, is everywhere. So for sure you can see what are the academies that are more focused on competition, what are the academies that have, like, for example, a women's program. And I think like for a lot of women it's kind of hard in the beginning because as it's such a contact sport, right, and we're not used to like being so close to everyone,
Hmm.
right? So sometimes maybe will be helpful to start in a like smaller group or something that is not very overwhelming for you. But yeah, basically do your own research before just going and showing up to a place. And if you know someone from that place, ask about the experience. And something that is also very important, whenever you don't feel like, let's say you like the sport but you don't feel right in this place, like the friends you made in that place are going to be your friend even if you're not training there, right?
Hmm.
So just be brave enough to talk to your coach first and say what's going on, what you're not liking. And if there's no change or nothing is being done about it, then maybe you have to look for another place for sure.
Sure.
Sometimes people just like choose their places to train out of convenience. Let's say I have this training academy some blocks away or whatever. But I think your experience overall is just much more important than the minutes it's gonna take you to get to the place. So yeah, whenever you don't like something, speak up. There's nothing wrong about asking why is this happening or whatever. But basically, yeah, do your research. And because jiu-jitsu itself is super beautiful, like the sport itself is just so beneficial for your health and for everything, that you should be in a place where you feel good and where everything seems good.
Sure. So you teach a class, and that's a women's defense class that primarily utilizes jujitsu. Can you talk a little bit about that? Where do you teach? When do you teach? And maybe a little bit more information in case there are any women that are listening that are curious to try and maybe even just sit in and watch a class or participate. Can you give some more details about that, Pam?
Yeah, of course. So right now we had this summer program. It was in the beginning, it was a 2-month program of self-defense. It's called self-defense and introduction to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because basically what we want is people in the sport, right? And we want to show the approach of Jiu-Jitsu for self-defense, right? And as I said before, like you can also use Muay Thai as self-defense. You can use other Krav Maga, but in this case, the class itself is like showing all the techniques from jiu-jitsu that can be applied in a self-defense scenario, but it's also about getting to know the sport itself. So there are some things that we're going to see or when we're going to practice that maybe you're not really going to use for a self-defense scenario because it's more to have points in during your match. Okay, so both things are covered in this class. And besides that is in Southside Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And but besides that class, actually, they have a program that is every Saturday with Professor Coach Emma. She's a purple belt. She's super, super tough, super, super good, super technical. And a lot of the other girls that also go to that class are very, very good. So yeah, that's a class that is like a non-stop, not only for the summer. And as I said before, as you said before when reading, right, I have a lot to focus right now on my studies and because of my scholarship. So I'm not like full-time teaching right now, but of course, every time I'm training there, I'm super, super happy to help everyone that is there if they have any question or if they want to come. We're actually training every Tuesday at noon now. And sometimes with the group, we decide to add some other classes on Friday morning, for example. But yeah, Southside has a lot of schedules, 6 a.m., 10 a.m., they're opening noon class. And then in the evening, you have 6 p.m., 7 p.m. So there are a lot of opportunities. And also, like, I must say that there are also a lot of other good gyms around the city. Okay, I have a black belt friend, as I told you before, in the academy and in the cellar. Both of them are super, super good. And yeah, there are other women's programs also if you're willing to get an introduction to jiu-jitsu.
Sure. If anybody's interested in taking your class, what would be the best way to get more information about that, or to contact you or Enrique, who owns the gym, what would be the best way for them to get more information and potentially reach out to attend a class?
Yes, for sure. That will be, they can do that through Instagram account of the school itself, Southside BJJ, or also they can contact me. It could be by mail or by Instagram. My email is pamela.boveda, my last name, and then it's just at gmail.com. So I can send like the program itself. It has already started, but people are like, of course, they can join right now, and then when the summer ends, they can just continue with the normal classes. So yeah, feel free to contact us and come train with us. It's an environment. It's a lot of fun, you know. Like it's good for me also to take that competition thinking out of my head, and actually, I'm starting to feel jiu-jitsu in like another way right now, and I am enjoying it so much. Like before it was just solo competition in my head. Now it's about refereeing, it's about helping other people, getting women into the sport, doing so many other things that before, because I was so focused on competing, I couldn't really enjoy them. And I feel that now I'm enjoying that. So yeah.
That's great. Does your class use a gi or is it no gi? And can you explain what a gi is, maybe for people who aren't sure?
So for most of the people, I also like to compare because most of the people watch Olympics, right? So basically, the gi, the clothes that we use when training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the same as people from judo wear, okay? And it's like a thicker fabric that you're able to use to throw the person, to push, to pull, and nothing's gonna happen, fortunately, luckily with the fabric. And so that will be gi training, like jiu-jitsu with gi. And then we have this other part of the jiu-jitsu that is the no gi, right? So you don't really need the uniform itself. You just need something that doesn't have any pockets or that is not very loose, that is more attached to your body. And but for now, like the girls that are going, they can use any sports clothing because at the same time we're working a lot of things for self-defense, right? And you're
Mhm.
not always going to be wearing what you need to do the sport itself. So yeah, actually I took some like clothes that we could rip them so we can basically try the chokes. And because with the uniform itself, nothing's going to happen to the fabric when you choke someone, but then with a real t-shirt it will break, but it's okay. Like
So wear maybe your painting clothes or something like that. Maybe something that could be ripped. Okay, that's good. Switching gears just for a little bit, I like to ask this question to many of the guests on this podcast. How has your notion of aging changed as you've gotten older or you have seen people in your life get older? Has it evolved over time, Pam?
So when I was younger, I think like of course I could train like much, like many more times a day, and my body would feel anything the next day and everything. But now it's like I kind of have to balance between, it's not about quantity anymore, it's about quality, right? But let's say 1 day or 2 days I don't train, my body feels it. Like you would actually think that the more you train, the more hurt you will be. But I think the less I train, the worse it's for my body.
Mm,
I'm
mm,
so used to it, and my body needs all this stretching, these moves. And I don't know, it's very different when I spend like 1 day no training or 2 days or whatever, and then when I do it every day, you know. So I think it, of course, now is about quality and not quantity anymore. As when I was younger, it was just every day. It doesn't matter if it's quality or whatever. I would do 3 times a day or whatever. Now I think I'm more about like technique, and I'm more about like really doing it properly. And I think that's also something that changed a lot in the old days, because we didn't have a lot of different size of people. You would just train with anyone, you know. I had to train with my friends that were like 200 pounds heavy, and that was very bad for my body. I think now with like the proper coaches and the proper people in the sport, and you can make it jiu-jitsu for much longer, or you can practice jiu-jitsu till the end of your life basically.
mm,
If you go to world's masters, you will see like these categories that are called like master 1, master 2, master 3. When you get to master 7, you're basically over 75 years old, and they're still competing there, you know. And that's because nowadays, and I'm sure their coaches know how to train them. It's not that they're gonna throw them, okay, just go with this 18-year-old guy that is crazy about, they're more prepared people. So I think now jiu-jitsu is for sure longer in your life.
Sure. Outside of jujitsu, do you have any other non-negotiable things that you find are musts for your physical and mental health? So you're in a very intense program right now. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that you need to get done. Are there things in your daily or weekly routine that are musts for you to make sure that you can keep your sanity and both your physical and mental health?
I think, like as I said, right, Minneapolis is a super beautiful city, and I'm every day in front of a computer or locked inside a gym. Okay, so basically, right now I feel that I need some outside time. Okay, during the week,
Mm.
even if it's walking, even if it's running, even if it's biking from this place to this other place, non like avoiding the car a little bit more, So I feel like this outside living is very important for me right now. So even if it's raining, I'm gonna walk to these places and I'm gonna bike to these other places, because like being locked in the gym and in front of a computer for so many hours is super like it's a lot. Okay, so that, and of course I eat things that are not super healthy, but I try to stay with my vegetarian diet. Well, I am vegetarian, but like clean eating, not
Mhm.
only vegetarian, because you can be vegetarian and eat trash anyway, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the eating. At the university we have this place, the Recwell. They have sauna. I think is also very beneficial, like to my body, and swimming once or twice a week. I try to do that also. So yeah, basically before I would think you're only gonna be good at jiu-jitsu if you do only jiu-jitsu. Now I don't think that anymore. I think that you need to, like, your head has to be also in the proper place to have improvements. So
As
yeah.
with all things in life, balance is the key. Very, very good. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Pam. I know you, as you mentioned, you've got lots of things to do and deadlines and projects and schoolwork and all sorts of things. So I really appreciate your time. Any last words of wisdom that you have for our listeners, or parting comments, or anything else that you'd like to share?
I would just say that if you have a little bit of interest on the sport or actually anything in your life, just go and try it. And because as I told, right, I when I first saw jiu-jitsu, it was this environment, very like not nice mat area with a lot of only guys there. And what if I have never asked if I could train, like my life would be like something else for sure.
Yeah.
And so if you have the curiosity and you like something, go for it, try. And if it's not the right place, just look for the right place and hopefully you'll find what it's meant to be.
I think that's very well said. I hope there's somebody out there that you have sparked their interest enough to maybe explore a class and to try something. And as you said very well, you never know where that could take you. Well, Pam, thanks so much for your time today. I so appreciate your life experience and your wisdom that you were able to share about this sport and this martial art that you and I both so enjoy in jiu-jitsu. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you on the mats.
Thank you.
Hi, bye now. Well, thanks so much for listening to the Better with Age podcast and my conversation with Pamela Boveda. Hopefully, you've learned a little bit more about jiu-jitsu today and perhaps even sparked a little interest in trying it out for yourself. At a minimum, hopefully understanding a little bit more about the importance of self-defense. If you're interested in learning more about Pam or connecting with her, you can reach her at pamela.boveda@gmail.com. Last name is spelled Boveda, and I'll put a link for you to be able to find. You can find her on Instagram at Pam HEKS, so at Pam Hex on Instagram. If you're interested in learning more about where Pam teaches her self-defense class at Southside Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you can go to www.southsidebrazilianjiujitsu.com. Jiu-Jitsu is spelled Jiujit There you can reach out on their Facebook page, their Instagram page, and you can contact the owner, Enrique, for information, or if you want to find out more about the classes that they have there. If you're interested in learning more about strategies to build bone health, gut health, strength, longevity, then you can check out the Better with Age program. That's a program my wife, Leah, who's a licensed nutritionist, and I have put together to help you live the best life that you can. You can go to www.betterwithage.online to learn more about the program. And as you heard in our conversation today, Pam and I talked a little bit about breathing. You can find a free breathing course for yourself. It's 3 videos long. It's designed to help you quantify or give yourself a score of your breathing currently and to give you some strategies for how to improve your breathing. I can't guarantee it'll improve your performance on the mats, but for a person walking and talking in this world these days, I think it's a wonderful start to give you a taste of how to breathe in the best possible manner. Until then, thanks again for listening. This is Galen. Have a good night or a good day, wherever you happen to be.